Hi, everyone, and welcome to Change Class 2 in the bariatric program here at Mayo Clinic. This class is titled Balance and Nourishment. So today we are going to spend time understanding what the three macronutrients are found in foods and how our body uses those nutrients. We're going to spend time reviewing portion sizes of foods within each of those groups, as well as learn how to balance meals and snacks. So what are these things called macros? These are nutrients that we need in significant amounts on a daily basis. Now, there's three macronutrients found in foods. We have carbohydrates, protein, and fats. Balancing your meals with these nutrients can be beneficial to be able to make your meal choices easier, not only now, but after surgery. Balancing your meals can help with your blood sugar levels throughout the day and can also help you feel full and satiated between meals. And balancing your meals can also help prevent nutrient deficiencies. Now, this class is going to be broken up into three sections. We're going to dedicate some time to each of the three macronutrients. We're going to start off with carbohydrates. Why do we need carbohydrates? Carbohydrates break down into glucose, which is your blood sugar. And carbohydrates are your body and your brain's main and preferred energy source. Carbohydrates are also an excellent source of fiber, vitamins, and minerals. So how many carbohydrates do we need in a typical day? So on average, we recommend about half of your calories to come from carbohydrates. Now that may sound like a lot, especially if you've gone on different diets in the past that were low carb, more high in protein and fat. But I do want to remind you that the carbohydrate macronutrient as a whole has a lot of foods that fall under it. It's a pretty large umbrella. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more coming up. Now, some of you may have seen this healthy eating plate before. This is a way to understand how to balance your meals to include the different food groups and also macronutrients. So you see here on this plate, I have circled the whole grains, the vegetables, and the fruits. Now, all of those groups contain carbohydrates. Some may be more than others, but I just want to show you in a healthy eating plate, the majority of the plate actually contains some carbohydrates. Now let's break that down a little bit further and talking about the different carbohydrate choices. So we have healthier choices of carbohydrates, so grains, cereals, breads, tortillas, starchy vegetables, potatoes, peas, corn, and winter squash fall under that category. Legumes, so beans, split peas, lentils, milk and yogurt, fruit, fruit juice, and vegetables. And we also have carbohydrates that we want you to limit. Maybe on the less healthy side, those would be things like baked goods, candies, sugary drinks, condiments, and many processed goods. Now, when we're talking about carbohydrates to get enough of, to get more of in your diet, we do need to talk about fiber because fiber is a part of those healthy, nutrient-dense carbohydrates. Fiber includes parts of plant foods that you cannot digest or absorb. So fiber passes through your GI system relatively intact. There are two different types of fiber. We have soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber dissolves in water and can help lower cholesterol and blood sugar levels. So some sources of soluble fiber would be foods such as oats, peas, beans, apples, barley, citrus fruits. We also have insoluble fiber, and this acts as a bulking agent and actually can help with reducing constipation, kind of like nature's broom, so to speak. And some sources of insoluble fiber would be things like whole wheat products, potatoes, nuts, cauliflower, green peas, berries, flaxseed, and the list goes on. Now, the majority of foods that are good sources of fiber actually contain a combination of both types of fiber. So, with that said, I generally recommend patients to aim for a goal of 25 to 30 grams of total fiber a day. A lot of times on nutrition labels, you won't see the distinction between which type of fiber is on there. So that's why, just a rule of thumb, aim for total grams of fiber per day rather than a certain amount of each type. Now, the benefits of fiber, um, as we are already discussing, helps with bowel regularity, helps with satiety, helps with blood sugar levels, helps with your heart health. Now, I know I mentioned some of those types of fiber-rich foods on the previous slide, but just to break it down a little bit more, some high fiber carbohydrates, first off, come from whole grains. So whole wheat products, whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, brown rice or wild rice, quinoa, barley, farro, oats, popcorn, corn tortillas, and corn tortilla chips. Another good source of high fiber carbs include legumes. So pinto beans, black beans, kidney beans, cannellini beans, chickpeas, and lentils. Starchy vegetables are a good source of fiber. So corn, peas, potato, and winter squash. And finally, last but not least, fruits and non-starchy vegetables. Now, as I mentioned in a previous slide, these aren't necessarily all going to be the same amount of carbs or the same amount of fiber. You know, vegetables, which we're going to talk about on this next slide, are going to be lower in carbs than, let's say, whole grains or potatoes, like the starchy vegetables. But they do still fall under this umbrella, which is why I want to talk about it in this section. Now, talking about fruits and non-starchy vegetables, they are high in fiber, of course, but they also are high in vitamins and minerals. So what I typically recommend when we talk about fruits and vegetables is to eat the rainbow. Try to eat a variety of different colors of these fruits and vegetables because the different colors, the different types are going to give you the different vitamins and minerals. And also phytonutrients, antioxidants, these are cancer-fighting properties. When I say non-starchy vegetables, essentially I am referring to any vegetable other than potatoes, peas, corn, and winter squash, those starchy ones I mentioned in the previous slide. So any other vegetable counts as a non-starchy vegetable. And I like to call those free calories per meal. You know, they typically are very low in calories, high in fiber. So they're going to give you that sense of fullness without giving you a lot of calories associated. So the more the merrier. I encourage you to aim for at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, and preferably to break it down as it shows on this slide. So aiming for like around 3 servings of vegetables a day and 2 servings of fruit. Now, a serving of vegetables would equate to 1 cup of raw vegetables, a half of a cup of cooked vegetables, or 2 cups of lettuce or leafy greens. So each of those count as 1 serving of vegetables. So we want a total of 3 for the day. And fruits can vary on the serving size based on what fruit you're eating. But a couple examples, 1 small apple would be a serving of fruit. A half of a banana would be a serving of fruit. A cup of melon or pineapple, for example, would be a serving of fruit, or 3/4 to 1 cup of berries would equate to a serving of fruit. So again, in total, 5 servings a day is recommended. When it comes to carbohydrates, I encourage you to try to have some consistency with your intake throughout the day. Having carbohydrates at each meal can help with balancing your blood sugars throughout the day. Having around the same amount of carbohydrates at each meal can also help with energy levels between meals. As I mentioned earlier on in this class, carbohydrates are your brain and body's preferred energy source. So you will notice a difference in energy when you are including carbohydrates regularly. And to help with that balance, I do encourage you to aim for around the same amount of carbs servings at each meal. Some of you may have diabetes or pre-diabetes, and you may have learned about carb counting in the past, maybe with a dietitian or an endocrinologist. Essentially, what that means is you are eating the same amount of carb grams at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Again, to help with that blood sugar consistency or regularity throughout the day. So to give you an example, let's say I have someone that is recommended to eat about 30 grams of carbs per meal. You can see above the nutrition facts label, it shows 1 carb serving equals 15 grams. So if you're allotted 30 grams of carbs per meal, that means you are allowed to choose 2 carb servings at breakfast, 2 carb servings at lunch, and 2 carb servings at dinner. Now, if we look on the right-hand side of this slide, we see what is a serving. So 1 serving of carbs is equivalent to a small piece of fruit, 1 slice of bread, 1/3 of a cup of rice or pasta, 1 cup of milk, 1/2 a cup of legumes or beans, 1/2 a cup of starchy vegetables, or 1.5 cups of non-starchy vegetables. So in this example, this patient can choose 2 of those choices, those carb servings, at each meal. So let's say for breakfast, they want to have a slice of toast and a piece of fruit. That's their 2 servings of carbs at breakfast. They want to have a sandwich for lunch, just keeping it simple. They have 2 slices of bread. That's their 2 servings at lunch. And then at dinner, they may want to have a large portion of vegetables and 1/3 of a cup of rice. So that would be their 2 servings at dinner. That is what we're talking about when we say carb consistency. Trying to eat around the same amount of carbs at each meal to help with blood sugar regularity, energy levels, and satiety. Now, we didn't talk at all about other foods, getting in proteins, getting in healthy fats. That is important for a balanced, diet, eating balanced meals throughout the day. But for purposes of, this specific topic with carbohydrates, just want you to be aware of that consistency we're referring to. And if any of you are, working on managing your diabetes or pre-diabetes, and you want to talk in more detail about carbohydrate counting, please reach out to the dietitian you're meeting with in the bariatric program, and we could definitely talk more closely about carb counting in those one-on-one sessions. Now, we talked a lot about what carbs to include in your diet to help with, all of those beneficial functions. We do have carbohydrates that we want you to limit. And one of those would be your added sugars. Now, added sugars are a form of carbohydrate. These are added to foods during processing. Added sugars provide extra calories to your intake with little nutritional value. So I like to make that distinction when we talk about carbohydrates to get more of in your diet. let's say your grains, your fruits. Yes, you are getting, like in your fruits, you're getting sugar, but it's natural sugar that is also paired with other beneficial properties. You're getting vitamins, you're getting minerals, you're getting fiber, you're getting water. Whereas added sugars, you're not getting that nutritional value. Added sugars can increase poor nutrition, weight gain, increased triglycerides, and tooth decay. And the top sources of these added sugars include sugar sweetened beverages, desserts, and sweet snacks. 1 teaspoon of sugar, if you want to visualize 1 teaspoon of granulated sugar, white sugar, that equates to 4 grams of added sugar. I want you to keep that in mind on this next slide here. So a recommendation I like to abide by is the American Heart Association recommendation, which is limiting your added sugar to no more than 6% of your calories for the day. Now, I know everyone's calorie needs may be slightly different that are, taking this class, but to use an example of about 1,500 calories a day, if we take 6% of that, that comes out to 23 grams of added sugar a day. Now, that's what we would like you to limit yourself to. And to put that more in a visual perspective, that's about 6 teaspoons of sugar a day. So you can, start paying closer attention to your nutrition labels and look for that added sugar section to see how many grams of added sugar you're getting in different products that you're eating. Again, you can also just visualize 6 teaspoons a day is your limit. And now most people may not just be adding sugar to their different foods, to their drinks. Most of the added sugar that we see coming from the diet are from processed goods. So it may be hidden or you may not realize how much sugar is in the different products you're choosing. Now, this list on the slide, multiple lists show a variety of words you may see on your ingredients list that are also considered added sugars. All right, so section number 2, we are going to talk about protein now. Why do we need protein? Protein helps build and repair tissues in your body. Protein helps with your immune system function. Protein helps create hormones and enzymes in your body. Protein helps regulate fluids. And protein can be used as an energy source. Now, we're going to talk heavily about protein throughout this bariatric program as we want to make sure that you consume adequate amounts in preparation and after surgery. You will be losing weight fairly quickly after surgery. And unfortunately, there is some muscle loss that results due to rapid weight loss. So we want to do all we can to help maintain your muscle mass during this weight loss process. So where do we find protein? It is found in different animal sources, such as beef, fish, poultry, pork, and lamb. Now, these different sources contain about 20 to 25 grams per serving. And a serving is about 3 ounces, which you can visualize as about the size of a deck of cards. So this is an appropriate amount to eat at each meal. You may be able to handle more now, being pre-surgery, your stomach, being more of a normal size, but post-surgery, this 3 ounces is adequate for you. And to put it into perspective, post-surgery, your protein goal, at least for a while, is going to be 60 to 80 grams a day. So this is going to be about a third of what you're going to need every day post-surgery. We also find protein in other animal products such as milk, specifically cow's milk, yogurt, cheese, cottage cheese, and eggs. Now, some of these sources are going to be higher than others, but just to mention a couple, Greek yogurt is going to be a higher protein amount than regular yogurt. You get maybe 12 grams of protein for a serving of Greek yogurt. Cottage cheese, I want to point out, that is a really good source of protein. You're getting about 14 grams of protein for just a half of a cup. And these are nice soft proteins, which are going to be beneficial after surgery when your stomach is healing. So I would encourage you to try to include some of these in your diet as you're preparing for surgery. You'll also find protein in plant-based sources. You find protein in nuts and seeds, nut or seed butters, dried beans and peas, and a variety of different soy or veggie proteins. So these plant-based sources are not going to be as concentrated in protein as your animal sources, but they are still a good supplement, to include within your protein foods for the day. So nuts and seeds, like for an ounce of nuts and seeds, you get 3 to 7 grams of protein. For the beans and peas, you get about 10 grams for half of a cup. And then soy proteins are pretty equivalent actually to animal proteins. You get about 7 grams of protein per ounce. So it's important, as you can see from these last few slides, to include a variety of both plant and animal sources. So that way you can hit your protein goals for the day. So besides including both animal and plant sources, I encourage you to bake, broil, or grill your proteins, help with minimizing the amount of added fat in it. And I encourage you, similarly to carbohydrates, to include a serving at each meal and snack. Carbohydrates at each meal give you that energy, throughout the day and the fiber and the vitamins and minerals. The protein is going to help satiate you. It's going to help you feel fuller longer between meals. So I do encourage you when you're eating a carbohydrate, pair it with a protein. To give an example, let's say for a snack, you want to have an apple. That's a carbohydrate. Maybe add a string cheese on the side or add a serving of nuts with the apple or nut butter, even peanut butter. That way you're getting that balance we're looking for. Let's say also to talk about a meal, let's say you want to have Greek yogurt as a breakfast. That Greek yogurt is primarily protein. You can add a carbohydrate to it. Maybe add some berries or some high fiber granola or low sugar, high fiber granola. So that way you can have more balance with getting both protein and carbs. So to give you some numbers here, for meals, it's recommended to get around 20 to 25 grams of protein. Snacks, you can aim for about 5 to 10 grams of protein with a daily total of 60 to 80 grams of protein a day. Now, as I mentioned earlier, your needs may be slightly higher now pre-surgery. Well, you can handle more calories, more higher portions. But this is going to be a good rule of thumb after surgery. Now, going back to this healthy plate model I showed you earlier, I have that healthy protein section circled because that is what we're referring to when we're talking about the portions of protein at your meals. So I mentioned, around 3 ounces of protein is ideal at a meal, but if you don't have a scale or maybe find it difficult to estimate how much you're getting in, you can just try to fill up a quarter of your dinner plate with protein, and that would be likely an appropriate portion size for you. Last but not least, we're going to talk about fat. Now, just to test your knowledge, I want to ask this question here. Which of the following foods do you think contains the most saturated fat? 1 hard-boiled egg, 1 fried chicken leg, 6 green olives, or a tablespoon of coconut oil? So the answer is 1 tablespoon of coconut oil. Now, the three other options, the egg, chicken leg, and green olives, are going to contain less than 5 grams of saturated fat. Some virtually none. Like the green olives has like less than a half of a gram of saturated fat. But the tablespoon of coconut oil actually contains close to 12 grams of saturated fat, which is fairly equivalent to butter. Um, so we're going to talk about the different types of fat and what they all entail, but I just wanted to start you off with this question to get the wheels turning. So why do we need dietary fats in our intake? Fats are a source of energy. Fats are needed for the absorption of certain, we call them fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, and K. Fats help support cell growth in your body. They help create hormones in your body. Fats help protect your organs and insulate your body. They also provide healthier skin. So a lot of benefits to fats. Now, where do we find dietary fats? They're in a variety of different foods, both plant and animal-based sources. We have all the different oils contain fat, salad dressings, which contain oil typically, mayonnaise, butter, cheese, cream cheese, fish. While fish is protein, it also contains fat, specifically those fatty fish like salmon or tuna, sour cream, gravy, bacon, nuts and seeds, nut butters, avocados, and meat. Now, again, you see there are some crossover foods here. Not all foods are just one macronutrient. We see nut butters and nuts and seeds. Those are also proteins, but they contain a fair amount of fats. Avocados, those are carbohydrates, but they also contain fats. And then, of course, meat is a protein as well. All right, so dietary fats. Let's first talk about unsaturated fat. Unsaturated fats are typically liquid at room temperature. If you want to visualize a bottle of oil and a stick of butter, the oil is liquid at room temperature. That means there's going to be more unsaturated fats in that product compared to the butter. Unsaturated fats help your cholesterol levels. They help raise the good cholesterol, that's called HDL, and they help lower the bad cholesterol, that's the LDL. There are 2 types of unsaturated fats I want to talk about. We have monounsaturated fats. Those are fats such as olives or olive oil, canola or canola oil, avocados, avocado oil, variety of different nuts, almonds, cashews, peanuts, pecans, pistachios. We also have polyunsaturated fats. And you see safflower, sunflower oil, sesame seeds, sesame oil, soy products, cottonseed oil, flaxseed, and walnuts. Now, under polyunsaturated fats, we also do have what we call omega-3 fatty acids. And you may have heard the benefits of those types of fats, helping with inflammation, brain health, heart health. And those would mainly be found in fatty fish, salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, anchovies. And we do recommend, if possible, to try to get a couple servings of those omega-3 rich fish servings per week. So now we have saturated fats. Saturated fats, on the flip side, are solid at room temperature. So as I mentioned with that butter and oil example, butter is going to be much higher in saturated fat than oil. Just by looking at it, you'll be able to tell because it is solid at room temperature. And going back to that example from that question earlier with coconut oil being very high in saturated fat, when coconut oil sits at room temperature, it is solid. Saturated fats may raise cholesterol levels and increase insulin resistance. So saturated fats may raise that bad cholesterol, LDL, that I mentioned earlier, and increase insulin resistance, so it can worsen blood sugar levels over time. I'm not saying I want you to avoid saturated fat completely, but because of some of these correlations, we do want you to limit the amount of saturated fat. Plant-based sources of saturated fat would include coconut and coconut oil, cocoa butter, palm oil, shortening, and hydrogenated oils. And animal sources would include full-fat dairy, so butter, whole milk, cream, cheese, high-fat meats, and eggs. Now, it might be a little confusing that I recommended eggs when we were talking about protein, but then here I put eggs as high in saturated fat. Again, I don't recommend that you cut out saturated fat completely. Just want to be aware of your portion sizes because eggs, yeah, do have that benefit. They're a great source of protein. The last fat we're going to talk about is trans fat. Now, trans fat is when food manufacturers add hydrogen to what is originally a liquid vegetable oil. And remember, liquid vegetable oils are typically high in unsaturated fat. But when hydrogen is added to it, it makes that liquid fat more solid and shelf stable. And that process of hydrogenation has a direct negative effect on human blood cholesterol levels. So there's a lot of research regarding trans fat done in the 90s. So over time, with different rules and regulations, trans fat has been significantly reduced in the market, but you may see it may be hidden in some foods. If you see the words partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, that indicates some trans fat. Stick margarines, shortening, whipped toppings, non-dairy creamers, pastries, snack foods, a variety of candies, baked foods, and fried foods may contain trace amounts of trans fat. So healthier choices. In terms of fats, I encourage you to choose primarily unsaturated fats, especially those omega-3 fats that I mentioned. Try to limit saturated fats and avoid trans fats. And with different foods or condiments that may be high fat, I encourage you to try lower fat options. That doesn't mean you have to go fat-free everything, but finding lower fat alternatives can be beneficial to help with limiting, those fats that can worsen cholesterol levels over time if consumed in high amounts. Now, this slide here goes through the three different macronutrients and roughly how much to consume per day based on your calorie goal. So we have the calories, a variety of calories listed on the left-hand side, anywhere from 12 to 2,500. Now, your dietitian may have given you a calorie goal when you first met with them at the bariatric clinic. If you don't know your calorie goal now, we're talking pre-surgery, please reach out to your dietitian to ask for that information so that way you can have a better understanding of exactly how many carbs, protein, and fat you should have based on your calorie goal. For those of you that are very new to just nutrition education in general, this might be a bit overwhelming. And if that's the case, don't feel like you need to follow these numbers to a T, make sure every single nutrient is accounted for. But I do like to provide this information for those of you that may have had a lot of nutrition education in the past and have a great understanding of, macro tracking or find it helpful to track all of your macronutrients. If you are one of those that is very new to all of this information, I do find it beneficial to use that plate model that I showed you on the earlier slides, where you're more so just focusing on how to break up your plate to include the different food groups and macronutrients. So to sum this class up, I encourage you to practice eating balanced meals at regular times throughout the day. Plan for small snacks as needed between meals. Have about the same amount of food each day. Try not to skip or delay meals. And limit foods high in fat and sugar. So that concludes class number 2 of the Bariatric Change Program. If you have any questions about the material, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of your bariatric team members to get the answers you need. Have a wonderful rest of your day.